Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another edition of the GD Report. I am D,
And I'm G.
and this is our first broadcast since we have a new commander in chief,
Yep.
46th President of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. And I think everybody collectively sighed a sigh of relief on Wednesday because it went through without a hitch. It was a
Right.
beautiful inauguration ceremony. Uh, G-Man, what thoughts do you have about the inauguration?
Well, I'll tell you that the thing that stuck with me was Biden's speech and that young lady's poem. I mean,
Yeah,
those were very powerful. Um, Joe Biden is never going to be a inspirational speaker. He's certainly no Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. But I thought his speech was just very moving and exactly what the country needed to hear.
yeah, I agree. And it was as far as inauguration speeches go, it's relatively short. I think it was about 22 minutes.
Yeah.
But I heard another commentator say that with everything going on right now, that this is the time that Joe Biden was made for, and this was the time, and it felt that way. It felt like, to me, it felt like a renewing of our country and a renewing of our democracy. That though we had been stressed to the limit, our democracy survived. I mean, to see the former presidents on the reviewing stand with Obama, Clinton, and W. Bush, almost threw an H in there, W. Bush, to see the Supreme Court justices, other than Alito, Thomas, and Breyer, who had concerns about COVID, about contracting that. The rest of them were present. And just seeing the fact that we had our first female vice president sworn in as well, also woman of color and Jamaican and South Asian, Indian parentage and lineage. It was a great day for the country, and I know a lot of our friends who are Trump followers probably don't view it as a great day, but to me it was a great day because, as I said, it felt like democracy survived.
Yeah, I think that was a kind of the recurring theme was that, democracy withstood this challenge of January 6th when it was definitely under attack, led by the then commander in chief, despite what he says now. But, anybody with half a brain knows that he incited that riot and he was pushing for them to succeed. And a lot of people don't realize how close we came to a coup. I mean, had they gone in and gotten a hold of Nancy Pelosi and a couple others, there would
Mike
have been
Pence.
no, well, not Mike Pence, but um, if they'd have gotten a hold of her and trimmed the line of succession, and then somehow uh, you know other assassins got to Biden and Harris, then we would have had a constitutional crisis, and I'm sure Trump would have declared martial law, and all sorts of things could have happened. So, I don't think the nation fully grasps how close we came to total anarchy that day.
Right. Yeah, and how close those people were to the chamber. Because to your point, if they'd gotten in the chamber and there'd been members there, the way they'd been behaving, does anyone honestly think they wouldn't have tried something? I mean, they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence,"
Yeah, well, and
and
evidently missed him by about 40 seconds.
yep, at 40 seconds and about 30 feet.
Right.
And
So,
he had his wife and his daughter with him, and that's supposedly some of the root um, of the fallout between he and the former occupant of the White House.
right.
Was the fact that gentleman didn't even call and check on Pence and his family to see if they were okay before they were whisked away.
Well, I mean,
Uh,
he's a total slime ball, and I
yeah,
think I think people that voted for him, not all of them, but I think some of the people that voted for Democrats in the past and decided to give Trump a chance and vote for him, the first time in 2016, I think they saw on January the 6th, just how terrible this guy is and what lows he will go to hang on to power, and so he doesn't have to say he's a loser. I mean, it's just incredible that after all that, people still support him.
yeah, it's pretty insane. And let's talk real quick about we've got a lot of the folks are being charged right now. The FBI continues to investigate. Um, I know that there's the famous realtor from Texas who's been charged. There's the QAnon shaman from Arizona has been charged. Uh, we've had a couple here in Oklahoma as well, but we'll see where the charges go. I know there's going to be a full scale investigation, and I was reading some comments from some folks who write about the FBI, and they were talking about this is one of the most full scale investigations, obviously, since 9/11 or the Oklahoma City bombing. But they also even took it back to um, the Lincoln assassination and
Right.
the plot that night where they had tried to kill Vice President Johnson, Secretary of State Seward,
Yeah.
Secretary of War Stanton as well. And they had only accomplished, unfortunately, uh, that they did accomplish one, which was Abraham Lincoln.
Then one of them got stabbed but survived, right?
Yeah, Stewart got Seward, William Seward, the Secretary of State, got multiple stab wounds and was disfigured for the rest of his life. And I believe one of his sons came to his aid and was able to rescue him. They had thought that Wilkes Booth had hoped that, and originally that was the plan, that Ulysses S. Grant would be with Lincoln at Ford's Theater that night, but he wasn't. They decided to pass on the play. What a night to pass.
Yep.
So some more of the fallout from this obviously has been the fact that a lot of the companies that have been lied about are having some differences of opinion about how that should be handled. But one of those that's been very aggressive is the Dominion company that manufactured voting machines. So why don't you tell us what's happening with that and with your favorite America's mayor?
Yeah, well, I'm proud to say that Dominion Voting Machines, that corporation is based right here in Denver, in my adopted home state. And they first sued Sidney Powell, the woman who was on Trump's legal team, who basically fomented the idea that somehow they were owned or in cahoots with Venezuela. So they sued her for 1.4 billion, and I so hope they win that and they get as much of that as they can. And then just today they came out and they decided they were going to sue America's mayor and Trump's head of his legal team, Mr. Rudy Giuliani, for 1.3 billion. And I sure hope they get that too. So I think anybody that makes up this kind of stuff just for the political theater, I think they should be held accountable. And I think Dominion's lawyers feel the same way, and that's why they're going after these people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also believe that those folks that they have ethics charges against in the Senate, the senators and the members of the House of Representatives, if they just do a censure of them and not an expulsion, which I think in a couple cases expulsion is appropriate,
Yep.
but I feel like part of the censure should be they have to go to the well of the Senate or the well of the House and state unequivocally that the election was free and fair and Joe Biden was the free and fair winner, and that all the things that they've said were false.
Right. Because there's still people out there saying the election was stolen, even though Republicans and Democrats and any election official that has anything to do with it said this was the most free and fair election we've had in probably 50 years.
Well, and it amazes me that Republicans in some cases are taking a really hard line where they're saying, we just wanted to reassure these folks that the election was fair and the results were fair, and that's all we wanted was a commission. We didn't want to overturn the result. Just people have concerns when they were the ones that created the concerns. They were the ones that stoked it. Donald Trump was the one who's been saying since November 3rd that the election was stolen, even before that, really. But once the election results came in, that it was stolen, it wasn't fair. And the Republicans played right along with it. Instead of, if they really wanted a commission to investigate it, they would have said that early on, and not the day that the certified results from every state that had been certified, as you said, by Republicans and Democratic control alike, were free and fair. So that's going to be interesting to see how those lawsuits turn out, because words do have consequences. I
Yeah.
know that Mr. Giuliani is also, the New York State Bar has received a complaint about disbarring him
Yeah.
from the Bar Association. And there's also another attorney, Cleta, I want to say Cleta Jones is her name, but she was one of Trump's advisors that was in the White House with him quite a bit. And she actually, she's a member of the bar here in Oklahoma, and they're actually filing charges against her.
Yeah. So
So,
there's a lot of fallout coming, and I think there's more to come. One thing I heard, Colorado Public Radio did a piece with the head of Dominion here in Colorado, and he basically said that nobody was immune from, from their, efforts at retribution. So I would be surprised if in the coming days we see a lawsuit filed against now citizen Donald Trump.
yeah, and that was that. I was wrong on that. Her name is Cleta Mitchell, the attorney that I was referencing. But there's been a petition filed with the State Bar Association to disbar her. One other topic which we didn't go over in the pre-show, which I wanted to cover, which I think has been the most underreported story of the last few days, is the fact that it's come out from both the New York Times and then also NBC News that up until the weekend before the inauguration, Trump was still in talks with the Department of Justice about doing basically his version of the Saturday Night Massacre with Nixon, where he had a low-level attorney who agreed with him at DOJ, and he was going to oust his acting attorney general, who was his hand-picked person after he forced Bill Barr out, and he was going to install this low-level person and have them try to force Georgia to overturn their results.
Right. Yeah,
So
he maintains that he won Georgia by 400,000 votes when there's been 3 recounts, one of them a hand recount, and every one of them has certified Biden as the winner.
yeah, so I mean I think the more the more time that there is for investigation, the more we're going to find out how absolute and totally corrupt this administration was, and how close we got to the foundations of our democracy being undone forever.
Right. Well, he did a lot of damage the 4 years that he was in there. So I was having dinner with a buddy of mine a few days ago, and he's a Trump supporter, but he basically said he was glad that he didn't win a second term because he thinks he did a lot more damage than he did good, and he thinks he did some good stuff. But it was all said and done. He thought, and he voted for Trump for a second term, but he said he was glad to see, especially after January 6th, that he didn't win. But
Absolutely. Let's talk real quick before we get into the pandemic. Any couple of topics I want to cover and ask you about. Any thoughts on the Biden cabinet and the appointees so far?
yeah, well, Biden promised in his campaign that he would select a cabinet that reflects America. And, Pete Buttigieg is excellent pick for agriculture. He is agriculture, right?
I think he is transportation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, transportation. Yeah, I think he's an excellent pick for that. Janet Yellen is just an awesome, awesome pick for Treasury. All of his cabinet picks look like they're going to sail through, except for his pick for Homeland Security, Josh Hawley, the infamous senator who is facing his own woes for maybe even being expelled from the Senate, has vowed to hold that up because of the commander in chief's views on immigration. So, no, I don't know why that is, part of the process, but Josh Hawley thinks it is. So, that's kind of, low ball politics in my view.
Yeah.
His pick for Department for Defense Secretary is, awesome. The first African American to lead that department. And that's a huge, huge portion of the federal government. And so, I think so far he's had stellar picks. What do you think?
Don't forget Attorney General Merrick Garland.
Oh, right. Yeah, Merrick Garland. And, I watched the press conference they had with all of the deputy attorney generals,
Yeah.
and all of them were women. And I
Yeah.
thought, man, just listen to their credentials. It's like, man, this, you hit a home run. These guys have, A plus credentials.
Yeah, it's impressive that none of them worked at Trump International Hotels, or none of them are related to him,
Right.
anything like that. And the fact that he followed the science and followed the experts. I mean, the guy he picked for Secretary of Education is the education chancellor from the state of Connecticut.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, just like you said, stellar credentials, and just a great representation of the population, and people who can get things done, and that are experts in the field. And I thought I saw the night of the inauguration, I saw a swearing in ceremony with, or maybe it was the next day, but within the first couple days, I saw where he swore in White House staff and federal government staff. He had about 1,000 folks on a Zoom call, and no exaggeration there, but he did the swearing in. And I thought it was so impressive the way Biden talked about. He said that if he ever heard any of the people on this call disrespect a citizen or disrespect a fellow coworker in his presence, that he'd fire them on the spot, no questions asked.
Well, it's readily apparent that we now have a president that values the term ethics.
Right.
Before, we had a president who valued the term no ethics.
Yeah, I thought his answers on investigations into Trump have been fantastic, because he said that's up to the Department of Justice. The president shouldn't meddle in investigations. If they think there's enough evidence or for a crime for charges to be filed, then they should file them. But they should do the investigation and come to that independent of me.
Yeah, and that's how the founding fathers thought it should be, and they thought that both houses of Congress should be part of the checks and balances. They never envisioned, because they didn't really envision political parties. In fact, John Adams fought against political parties, and it cost them the election of 1800. But they never envisioned political parties, and they certainly never envisioned one party basically foregoing its principles and standing behind a member of their own party just to keep their party in power.
Right.
And which is what the Republicans have done. So, I mean, they're lamenting the fact that Trump hijacked their party, but they could have nipped this in the bud 2 years ago. They could have voted for impeachment and removal when he pulled the stuff he did with Ukraine, and if they hadn't worked to cover up the Russia investigation, if they hadn't gone along with Trump's rhetoric, calling it a hoax and a witch hunt, which anybody with half a brain knows it wasn't, and part of the blame goes back to Mueller, because if Mueller had charged him with a crime, which he later told Congress he could have, he just felt like it was Congress's job to do that, and that's why he didn't. But if he had charged him with a crime and let Congress move forward, he'd have been out early on. But c'est la vie.
Well, exactly. And the thing is, to your point, they can't really cry spilled milk now whenever they didn't do anything about it, and didn't
They enabled it.
Yeah, and they just stood by and let it happen, and didn't like I said, they didn't do anything about it. They didn't try to stop it. Only when it started to affect them, their own personal safety, and then also the fact that corporations have started saying that people that supported the overturning of the election were going to stop getting campaign contributions. Suddenly they have a conscience about it, and suddenly Moscow Mitch feels bad about it. Speaking of Moscow, what's
my
that?
buddy works for FedEx. They've gotten out of the political game altogether, according to him. They vowed that they're never going to have another, fund another campaign anywhere, city council or state legislature or Congress or president.
Yeah.
So,
Speaking of Moscow Mitch, a couple things about him also before we get out of here tonight.
yeah,
He did just drop he was going to filibuster the Senate rules resolution. I mean, if he could, he was trying to extort the Democrats to promise they wouldn't get rid of the filibuster. Kind of interesting that he wanted them to promise they wouldn't get rid of it by using it.
right,
And calling for unity by filibustering it, and he dropped that demand tonight. And now this, because up till now, until they had a new rules resolution, the existing committee chairs were in charge of the committees.
right,
So even though the Democrats have been sworn in into the majority, the committee chairs were still Lindsey Graham and Chuck Grassley and people like that.
right.
And now officially tonight, the Democrats will take over the committee chairs. And it's going to be an interesting time because typically the sitting president's party loses seats in the first midterm.
Yep.
However, the Senate map, as much as I hate to say this early on, is looking very favorable towards Democrats.
Yeah,
There was
don't they
another,
have to defend like 28 seats, the Republicans?
yeah, and there's three major open seats too. North Carolina is open. Richard Burr is not going to run again.
Right,
The Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania is not going to run again, and then just announced today Rob Portman from Ohio is not going to run again.
right.
And so if they could recruit a decent candidate in North Carolina that could stay faithful to his wife for the course of a campaign, I think they would have had that seat already. The other seat, they would have had a Tom Tillis's seat.
Right.
But there's a John Fetterman, the lieutenant governor from Pennsylvania, is seriously eyeing the Senate race there, which I don't know if you followed him or anything, but
Yeah.
he's a really cool dude, big, tall, like he's like 6'8", just really progressive and doesn't back down at all. He's going to be a phenomenal candidate if they can recruit him. And then I'm not sure about Ohio, but there's I think Tim Ryan from Youngstown would be a great fit there.
Right. What do you think about the Dems recruiting Kasich and having him switch parties and run for that seat?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know. It's Kasich's got a long history of being really anti-choice and and being so pro tax cut and so anti-environment that I just don't know that he would fit. I think he's in that purgatory right now that a lot of Republicans or former Republicans are in, where because there's only two choices on the menu.
Right.
So those would be interesting. Also, they did get the Republicans also today got bad news in the Senate because they were trying to recruit the Steve. It's not Steve. Is it? I think it's Doug Ducey, who's the governor of Arizona.
Yeah.
Republican. They were trying to recruit him to run against Mark Kelly because Mark Kelly's up again
In 2 years.
in 2 years, and they were trying to recruit him. And he was just this past weekend at the Arizona Republican convention. He Cindy McCain and then former Senator Jeff Flake were all censured by the state Republican Party, and so he said he's not running for Senate. And he was probably their best chance to win that seat.
Right.
So now you're probably going to have Kelly Ward, who's the crazy party chair of Arizona. That she's the one that's been insulting to John McCain for a long time. She's probably going to be their odds-on favorite to win that nomination, and
Right.
so that tees up nicely for Mark Kelly to be reelected there.
Yeah, I think he's a great candidate. And unless something happens in the next 2 years to change that, I think he ought to have an easy path to victory down there.
So there's a lot of seats there that are going to be really in play for Democrats. Wisconsin's another seat too. Ron Johnson hasn't decided yet if he's going to run again or not. But that guy went from being kind of a moderate to being full bore crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's finish up. Sad news. We're about to hit. They say by the time we get to March, we'll probably have 500,000 deaths from COVID-19 coronavirus. And no matter what he tries to say, that's going to be the legacy of Donald Trump, that and the insurrection on January 6th.
Yeah. And it's like all the good you did, and I've got friends that think he did a lot of good, but all the good you did gets overshadowed by those numbers and that one event.
We can have another show where we discuss what good he did. Might be a short show, but the but yeah, absolutely. I mean, any chance you had to make a legacy case by the fact that, I mean, you think about it, since the election, he hadn't worried a thing about COVID. He's barely said, the only thing he said about COVID since the election was that he wanted to make sure he got credit for the vaccine.
Yeah, which
And
he didn't. I mean, we were talking before the show. Pfizer didn't take any government money,
right.
and they had the first vaccine out. So
Right. And that and the insurrection, but it's just a sad thing that we're going to have 500,000 people that pass away from something that could have been a lot less if it hadn't been politicized, and if it
yep,
hadn't, we didn't have a commander in chief who wouldn't just swallow his pride and say, everybody wear a mask, and say, this is not about politics at all. I firmly believe that was one of the things when I looked at when that virus happened, when it first started occurring, and we realized it was pandemic levels. I know you and I talked about this multiple times, that I don't like to look at those things politically, but I can't help but do so. That Trump had an opportunity there that he could have really stepped up and led, and if he would have, I think he'd have been reelected.
yeah. Well, I think if Pfizer had come out, 6 days before the election instead of 6 days after, that they had the cure, I think he would have been reelected anyway. But they didn't. He accused them of playing politics with the cure, and they countered with, we released it as soon as we knew we had it. So there's, who do you believe in that case? But I tend to believe Pfizer.
Yeah.
So
Well, he also was pressuring them before the election to come out with it, and they said, "We're not going to come out with it just because you want it out. We're going to do it when it's time to do that." But yeah, it's a shame that had to be political at all.
yeah, yeah, it's a shame we're going to top 500,000 deaths, if not more.
So that's a good reminder to everybody out there: be safe, wear a mask when you go out,
Yeah,
social distance from people. Just because we've got a vaccine now and it's starting to get into arms doesn't mean that we're safe. So
yeah,
even people that have been vaccinated can be carriers and give it to somebody who hasn't been. So still
right.
take the precautions and let's everybody be safe.
Amen to that.
All right. Well, that wraps us up for tonight. It's been a great conversation. Thanks, G-Man.
Sure, man.
And we will, everybody take a listen, drop us a line, drop us a question. If you think we're right, let us know. If you think we're wrong, let us know that too. If you know of any topics you'd like us to cover, let us know. I know we're probably going to be really policy focused for the next few weeks because we're going to have confirmations and things like that, but we're also going to have a lot of policy debates. So
Yeah.
a lot of things coming up when it comes to that. So everybody take care and have a great night.
Good night, everybody.